To my dearest audience of the Professor Ming's Strategic Insights, wish you have a very happy, very smooth, and very fruitful year for the coming new year. Thank you for your support. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Professor Ming's Strategic Insights. In one of our previous programs, we talked about China's economic performance in the year 2024. We looked into 6 or 7 sectors in China's economy, and we then came to the realization that the overall performance in China's economy in the year 2024 is not so good. It's rather, how shall I put it, disappointing. Now that we're already into the year 2025, so based on what we know about what happened in 2024, I think it's appropriate for us to take a glance into the future, into this year actually, the performance or the would-be performance in China's economy in the year 2025. According to a news piece released by the government of Communist China, they claim they're going to do a few things in terms of improving their economic situation, economic performance. First, they say they're gonna raise the fiscal deficit ratio. That's first. Second, they're going to issue in a large quantity of ultra-long special treasury bonds to absorb more money. And the second. The third is they are going to cut interest rate so that they can release more currency, more money into the market. The fourth one is they're going to cut reserve requirements. And the last one is they're going to adopt, when time comes, adopt what they call the adequate QE policy. So, well, that sounds good. But if you put them together, you'll realize that the focus of their policies seems to be on the how to increase government spending rather than how to increase or how to promote consumers' spending. And these are two different approaches, and they'll come with different results. But anyway, we're kind of doubtful how effective the government's policies would be. But anyway, let's try to do a little bit of analysis and see how it goes. If we look into the economic performance in the year 2025 in Communist China, there are many factors that would affect the outcome of the economic performance. But all these factors can be classified into two major categories. The first one is of course the external factors, and the second is the internal, of course. Let's talk about the external first. There are, of course, several aspects that we notice that we can identify in terms of their so-called external factors. The first one is the change or the major change about China's international trade relations with other countries. Let's set aside the almost inevitable trade war or tariff war against China by the United States or by the major European countries or even by Japan, Australia, and countries like that. Let's set aside those things away for a minute. If we just look at the possible effect of geopolitical factors around the world, that we will know that China's economic performance would be affected, not in a negative way. For instance, because China depends upon export highly. So if the risk of the geopolitical problems rises to a certain extent, it will deal a heavy blow to China's international trade, as it showed in the year 2023, 2024, and 2025. For instance, the war in Ukraine, and that's a good example. The second one is already here since Mr. Donald Trump has already sworn into the White House and become the president of the United States again. And he's been saying that he's going to do something about trade with China, tariffs, de-risk, sanction, and possible embargo. So these are all major challenges possibly posed by President Trump. And that's what we see might happen or may happen actually in China's international trade relations. That's number one. Following that is the de-risking or even delinking of the critical technological or technology industries. For instance, semiconductors, new energy, AI, artificial intelligence. If foreign countries or the trading partners of China, they feel that they're threatened by coming to China in one way or another, they'll do what we just mentioned. And we can see a possible break or fracture of China's production chain around the world. And again, that'll be a heavy blow to China's production, especially in these areas, semiconductors, new energy sources, and AI, things like that. And we also notice there are more and more countries who hate China's theft on technology, techniques, and intellectual property rights. The more they feel about it, and the stricter the restrictions against China will become. So that's the second point that we notice. The third one is the dumping. The overcapacity by China, by Chinese industries. We've been noticing that phenomenon for a few years, 2-3 years, and it's become more and more serious. And more European countries are now very vocal about it. They said it before, but not as strongly as it is now. So it'll be a new thing. It'll be an important thing. Overcapacity in any country is not a good thing because it means it's a waste, and also it's a waste of energy, capital, labor, and all kinds of things. And the overcapacity happens major in China. It happens major in the SOBs, the state-owned enterprises or businesses, because they're receiving heavy subsidies from the state, from the government. And sometimes if you look into the figure, it's very surprising. If you look into the figure, if you look into the real figure of the subsidies they receive from the state in comparison or in contrast with the actual profit they make, sometimes the subsidies exceeds their profits. That's absurd. That means they're not really making money. They're just receiving more money from the government to cover up their deficit or cover up their loss in their business or in their trading. The last one associated with all these is the expectation. The expectation of foreign countries about China and about China's economy, about China's economic future, and all these things. So we always say that business has a lot to do with confidence. If you have confidence, then you will want to risk. You could tolerate higher percentage of risk, and you want to put more money. You want to expand a little bit more. You want to reach out even more. But if you're not confident about this future, then you'll become very conservative. Or even you'll pull back, you'll withdraw completely. That's exactly what happened to many foreign investment into China, as we mentioned before. So those were the external factors. Now let's turn into the internal factors. Again, we also identified a few aspects in terms of the internal things. The first one is the sharp decline in consumption in China. Well, people always argue that after the very strict quarantine policy adopted for the past 3 years, from 2019 to 2022, So there will be a retaliatory consumption, and people were anticipating that. But it turned out that did not happen. It runs contrary to many people's expectation. But we kind of expected that before, because I was talking to a few friends, and my wife too. And she mentioned, if there would be retaliatory consumption in China, how come similar things will not happen in other countries? So that means if there's a bounce back of China's economy through the so-called retaliatory consumption, then it will happen in other countries. Why don't we see it? If we don't see that in other countries, then how can we expect that to happen in China? I think that's the first thing that she was the first one that mentioned it to me. So it was like a shock to me. I said, yeah, that's a simple truth. Why didn't I think of it? But then she was right. It turned out that she was right. So I brought up the topic in one of my social gathering and talked to my friends. They all agreed. They said, yeah, well, perhaps we should invite your wife to our dinner party next time. And that's good. So that's a decline of consumption in China, and it's not easy to restore or to regain its momentum as it used to be. Communist Chinese government tried a few new policies, tried to promote that. For instance, what we mentioned before was that the first thing is what they call the internal circulation. Meaning they're gonna promote consumption and production and things like that inside China, inside China's market. But because the savings were gone, they were all spent up in those 3 years, from 2019 to 2022, because business was low and they lost their jobs, so they have to use their savings, and it's gone. It's basically gone. Because there's no saving, there's no deposits, so there's no consumption. Simple as that. So that means internal circulation did not come out. And the second one is the government urges people to buy new home appliances, as we mentioned before. You should buy more new TV sets, buy new refrigerators, telephone sets, or mobile phones, and things like that. But again, it did not work well. No, it doesn't work well. The reason for that is the same as before. People simply don't have that much money to do that. Or if they expect the future would not be as good as they expect, then they will not spend more money. They rather save those money in their pocket, just for the sake of safety. That's the first thing. Second thing is the decline of production, or the productivity capacity. Again, it's because of the rigid quarantine policy, and also because of the government policy of advancing the SOE, state-owned enterprises, and retreat or suppress the privately owned businesses. And that's a bad policy, as we suggested before. And then the government adopted or released or put out new national security laws, and the so-called data security laws, and Article 23 of Hong Kong Basic Laws, and things like that. It all hurts people's confidence in the operation of the market. And then that comes to a very unusual thing. Usually it doesn't happen in other countries. That's what we call pelagic fishery. Again, let me say this again. It's not about fishery. It's not about fish. It's about how you execute the law by the local police station or by the local policeman. They will try to arrest businessmen in other provinces and try to blackmail them. Actually, that's blackmail. So all these will hurt people's confidence in China's economy, and that's the second thing we notice. The third thing is the real estate market, or the home building business or industry. The crisis would be even more severe in the year 2025, as we are anticipating. Well, you see Vanke, you see Evergrande, and you see Country Garden, and all these big real estate companies or conglomerate. They even gone into bankruptcy, or they even claim restructuring of their financial structure. That means they're facing real financial problem. They have problem with operation, with their business, and things like that. So if the big ones in the real estate industry in China are experiencing such bad things, that means the whole industry doesn't look good. It doesn't look good in 2025, except for the so-called the Zhujiang Delta and Yangtze River Delta and the area surrounding the Bohai area. Except for these three general areas, the real estate industry in other areas all over China don't look good. And we are worrying that there might be a collapse of the real estate market in China. And you have to remember that the real estate industry doesn't mean that buying houses and selling houses. It's just more than that, because it has to do with a lot of upstream and downstream industries. Raw material, building material, paints, working forces, and loans, and then sell houses, and then again, financial systems, all are involved. So it consists of, actually it constitutes about a third of China's economy, or it contributes to at least a third of China's economic development. Now that it runs into, well, let's not say bankruptcy. If it runs into stagnation, it's a heavy blow to China's economy, overall economy. So you know how bad it could be. And that's the third thing that we notice. The fourth one is that the debt of the local government and of the state-owned enterprises and that kind of things. We've been talking about that before, but let me remind you here. Many local governments are still pursuing a high development or high growth in their GDP figures because they look good on their so-called their achievement, their political achievement, and that's a good plus for their political future. So they would want to do a lot more on these things. So we see many local governments, they want to borrow money to build more high-speed rail, to build more highways, and build more airports, even though they don't need it or they cannot afford it. And some places are now building more reservoir. Again, even if they don't need it or they don't have the facilities, but they still want to do that. The most recent thing I've been hearing about what the local governments in China would do is they want to dig canals. Can you imagine that? And they have already put out some very grand and very alarming, let me put it this way, very alarming programs about this. I'm not sure that the central government would give them a green light on that, but I've heard that before. Not to mention that, again, the government is now still adopting the policy of advancing the state-owned enterprises and suppressing the privately owned businesses. And that's going to hurt the Chinese economy even further. And we all know that the state-owned enterprises are basically less efficient and less effective than the state-owned ones, than the privately owned ones, excuse me. But still, they want to do that. So we imagine if they don't reverse the policy, if they don't change the direction of the policy entirely, then that definitely, it's a minus to China's economy. That's a fourth one. The fifth one is about renminbi, the value of renminbi. In our previous programs, we warned about the possibility of depreciation of renminbi, China's currency, because of the deterioration of the external environment and because of the drop of the confidence and so on and so forth. It'll lead to depreciation of the renminbi, of the Chinese dollar. Well, yeah, it is good. Depreciation of the renminbi was good for exports, but it's bad for imports. That's first. And second, foreign company and foreign investment would drop. Consequently, they'll pull out. They'll withdraw from China's market. So it'll be again a heavy blow to China's capital market, and it'll be a blow to China's economy as a whole. So it'll constitute a negative impact. It'll create a negative impact upon China's economy. It weakens China's economic stability. So that's bad, and it's going to happen. We don't know how far it will go, but I've noticed that like Swiss Bank or Deutsche Bank and other another big companies, big financial companies or big banks around the world are quite pessimistic about the value of renminbi. I've seen the exchange rate between renminbi to US dollar from 7.0 to 1 to 7.2, 7.3, 7.5. The lowest figure I've seen so far is 8.0, 8.2, and 8.3 to 1 US dollar. So that's a bad thing. And that means that deflation is inevitable. It's there. Well, we may see recession as the Treasury Secretary, the incoming Treasury Secretary of the United States, was saying that we may not see a depression in China, but we definitely see a recession in China. That's what he said. So I think that's something that we should put in mind. And the last thing we notice, or last factor we notice, is of course the banking system or the financial system of the country of communist China. So that means the government's fiscal capability would be negatively impacted by all these factors as we mentioned before. So again, that's the last thing that I want to mention it to you. So eventually we say it's not just the policies or policies that you have to change. It's the system. It's the structure in the system. We've been saying that, yeah, market economy may not be perfect, but a market economy is definitely superior to a planned economy or to a command economy as adopted by the communist countries or communist states like the former Soviet Union and the former communist countries, former communist regimes in Eastern European countries. So there's two models and two roads, and it's been tested, empirically tested. And associated with this market economy is their attitude or their policy toward private property. Whether individuals or private citizens can own their property or their money or whatever they have or whatever they earn, and can they have it? Can they enjoy that? And thirdly, are these private properties legally protected by the government and by the legal system, by the laws? And usually that comes along with the so-called democracy or the democratic system. Again, we're not saying the democracy or democratic system or rule of law is perfect. We're simply saying that's the better thing, or that's a better way to protect or to promote the vitality of the society as a whole. Well, let's just narrow the topic. If we don't say that, if we're not talking about the promotion of the society as a whole, at least you could create a better business environment for the businesses and for the enterprises and so on and so forth. It'll create a much more money, a bigger wealth, a bigger pot of wealth, or even a bigger pond of wealth for people to live in. So again, I think it's not just a matter of policy or policies. It's a matter of the system, a matter of the structure. I'm not sure that they can do that in 1 year, but that's the questions and that's a problem we can identify so far. And in the coming year, in this year, in the year of 2025, we'll see more things to come: economic, social, and even political. So again, that's all I want to share with you today. I hope you liked today's program. And please subscribe and share it with your friends. And then if any questions or comments, you're all welcome. And remember, click the icon, the program icon, so that you'll get a simultaneous notification once we have a new program out. Again, thank you, and I'll see you next time.